Hey, what's happening guys? In this video, we're going to take a look at deploying a full stack Clojure application. So let's get started. Cool, so before we get started, the way that we're actually going to build this application is by creating a Dockerfile which will build us our jar file. And what we're going to do is use GitHub Actions to SSH into a Linode server, pull down our repository, compile the jar file, and run it. So let's just get started. The first thing I want to do is pull down this repository of our full stack Java application. I've made videos on how I built this. Basically, it's a URL shortener, so we just put a URL in an input box and it will give us a short URL back, and when we click on that URL, we'll get redirected to the original URL. So let's just clone this, git clone, and I'm going to clone it into a directory called short URL deploy. Then I'm going to cd into short URL deploy, and I'm just going to remove the git folder, the git directory. Awesome. Then I'm going to open it in VS Code. So the first thing that I want to do before we get actually into anything is update our environment variables. I was using PlanetScale to create a database. Well, I used PlanetScale to create a database because you can create a free database there. So I'm just going to add new credentials there. So I'm going to click connect here, new password, and I'm just going to copy this new password and username. And now we should have a working database. Then let's get started on actually creating that jar file. So the first thing I want to do is go to tools.build guide, and this is how we can build our jar file and configure the build using Clojure code. So the setup is really easy. We just need this build alias, which I'm going to copy out of here and go to deps.edn and add it to our aliases map. And then we just need to replace this library with the right tag and char. So let's go to the top here, click on tools.build. This will take us to the GitHub repo, and here we can copy the library. So go back to our project and replace this. And then I'm going to create a new file here. I'm going to call it build.clj. And they've actually given us pretty much everything we need to compile an uberjar in this documentation. We just need to copy from compiled uberjar application build. We just copy this build, paste it in here, and here we can see we have a namespace build, and this is looking for the build namespace. And what this script does is basically use this tools.build library to compile a jar file for us. We don't need this library version, we don't need this version, it's just used for the naming of this file, which we're actually just going to call standalone, or we call it app standalone.jar. And if we go down here, we can see that it's looking for a main function inside of this namespace. We obviously don't have this namespace, so let's use the namespace that we do have. And if we go to source CLJ core, this is where I want to add the main function, and this will be the starting function that starts our application. So let's go to build.clj and use our short url.core namespace, and now let's create that main function in here. So in order for that function to be executable, we need this gen class form inside of our namespace. And then we pretty much want to run the start function, which starts our server, and we want to run that inside of our main function. So defn -main, you need that hyphen there. And we run the start function to start our server, and let's just add like a print line here to say starting app. And I also want to, I don't want these two forms to just run when this file evaluates, so I'm just going to put those inside of a comment form. Cool, and I actually think we have enough to run this build tool. So let's open up our terminal, and the way that you can run a build tool is by running clj Clojure -t for the tool. Then the tool is going to be, we need to do a hyphen, it's this build tool. So we run build, And then we need to reference a function within build.clj, and we're going to reference this uber function. So let's run uber. And this should build us our jar file. And there's an issue in our deps.edn file. Let's check. Save. We had an extra curly brace. So now let's rerun this. Awesome, it looked like it worked. So if we check our directory, we should have a target folder. We do, and there's our jar file. So to run that jar file, we just need to run java jar and then the path to our jar file, which is this. Rad, and now we should have it running on port 3001 because that is the port. If we check our start function, that's the port that our app starts on. So let's go there, go to localhost 2001. Cool, and it is working, rad. But now if we check our network tab, we can see that we're getting a 500 on the favicon.ico because we don't have one. So let's just add one quickly. Let's close this. I am just going to go to resources, assets, add a new folder here, call it images, and I'm going to paste the favicon in there. I'm just going to use, I've got a favicon, which is just an alien emoji. So let's add it to this directory. And now let's go to our index.html and let's reference that favicon. So to do that, we just go link relationship, and that is icon, and then the type is, I think it's image x icon, and then the href is going to be assets / images / favicon.ico. And if we go to, this will work because if we go to core.clj, we are just serving everything in our assets directory. So that will be found. And then there was another issue, if we go back here, where we can see that shadow-cljs is trying to connect to this application. But this is a production application. So we want to run like production JavaScript. So let's compile our JavaScript into production JavaScript. So let's remove JavaScript from our assets directory. Let's delete this. And let's open our terminal, close our running application, and if we go to shadow-cljs user guide, we can see to generate production code, we just run shadow-cljs, release, and then the build ID. So let's copy this out, paste it in here. Now our build ID is called app, and you'll see that in the, if we go to shadow-cljs.edn, this is our build, it's called app. So if we run this, oh, it doesn't work. So when I ran that, I got this file not found exception, and that's because I've got this error in my deps.edn file where I closed this aliases map too early. So I just need to move that to here, save this. And now I should be able to run shadow-cljs release app. Okay, now we're getting that with dependencies are required, but they're not available. So I'm just going to run npm I, and then clear this, and then we can run shadow-cljs release app again. Awesome. So now in resources, we'll have our compiled JavaScript. So now if we build our jar file again and we run that jar file, you see starting app. Now we can refresh this page. Cool, it's working, but we have no styles. So let's just go back and see why that is. So if we go back to our index file, it's very clear why we have no styles. So let's just fix this up. Then let's rebuild our uberjar and then rerun it. So rebuilding, let's rerun it. Go back to our page, refresh it. Yeah, okay, it's working. Awesome. The first thing I want to do before we Dockerize this build is actually let's do something here. We don't want our CSS. We want to like compile that when we build it. So I'm going to delete this here. And our JavaScript, we don't want to have that. We want to delete this and only have it when we build it. So I'm going to add those to our get-ignore, or those paths to our get-ignore. So we're going to ignore from resources /public /assets /JavaScript and everything in that directory. And we're going to ignore everything in the CSS directory. Cool. Then what we want to do is create a Docker file. So a new file, Docker file. And we want to start this from, we can actually go to the Docker Hub page of Clojure, and there is actually an image here for the build tools. So let's go down here. Yeah, tools.deps. So we can copy this, Clojure tools deps, and that can be our base image. Then what we want to do is we want to copy everything here from here. Let's go back to that image. Yeah, we want to copy everything into user source app. So let's paste that here. Then let's compile our JavaScript. So let's run npm install, and we also need shadow-cljs. So let's run npm ig shadow-cljs and then npm install. We want to run, and then we want to compile the ClojureScript. So we run shadow-cljs release app. But now in order for these commands to work, we actually need npm. So we need to install Node, and to do that, I found some guy's comment on just on GitHub. So I'm just going to copy this and add it, and this will install Node version 14.18.1, which is cool. Then we also need to compile Tailwind. So to do that, what we need to run is npx tailwind, the input file, and that would be this global.css, the output file, and that will be, I think it was resources /public /assets /css /output.css. And then we want to add this minify flag. Let's see if that works. Doesn't. Oh, okay, you don't, it's not out, it's O. So let's do this. Cool, and that will compile our CSS. So let's copy this command here and add it to our Docker file. So let's do that first. And then finally we can compile the uberjar. So we'll just go run clj t:/build uber, and that will build us the jar file. And then we just need to run that jar file. So we can run command java -jar, and then the path to that file, which is target /app standalone.jar. And this should be our Docker file. So what I want to do is actually create a Docker compose file to run this. So docker compose.yaml. And then we need a version here, and I'm just going to use 3.9. Then we're going to have services, and the first service is going to be, say, app, and we're going to build our Docker file is sitting in our main directory, so we can just go build dot, and then let's just map a port. Let's map port 8080, so that's our local port, to port 3001, and that's where our app is running. So now we should be able to run, just make sure you got Docker running, so docker compose up app. And we're getting an issue with this shadow-cljs command, but I actually think we can run it with npx. So let's go back to our Docker file, and instead of doing this global install, let's run npm I and then npx shadow-cljs release app, and let's try rebuild this. And now we're getting this required JavaScript dependency React is not available. So let's add that to our package.json. Yeah, let's add that here. react and add the version. You can do this. And now let's try do this again. Oh damn, okay, I'm already so it did work, but I already have a binding for port 8080 running. So I'm just going to go back to Docker Compose, and I'm just going to change my port here to be like port 8085. And then let's just rebuild this. Docker Compose up app. Well, not rebuild it, rerun it. Cool, and it looks like it worked. So let's go to localhost port 8085. That looked like it worked. Let's copy a URL and paste it in here. Click shorten URL. It shortened the URL. Let's click it. Awesome, this app is working with our Docker build. So now let's create a server and let's pull down this repo on that server and do the same thing on a server to have this running on a server in the cloud. I'm going to be using Linode for this. The reason I'm using Linode is because I got some free credits thanks to Lex Friedman. And let's create a node. I'm going to go to Marketplace and I'm going to search for Docker here. Click Docker and let's check what we want for the setup. Don't need any of this. Select an image. I'm going to choose Debian 11. A region, I'm going to choose London. Cool. You can obviously go for the dedicated 512 gigabyte server, but for now, I'm just going to use this Linode 1 gigabyte, $5 a month one. And yeah, root password. I'm just going to suggest a strong password and copy it. Create our Linode. Then let's SSH into that server. Cool, let's SSH into that server then. Yes. Let's put the password in. Yeah, and we're in the server. So what I want to do now is pull down a GitHub repo, which we don't have. So I'm just going to go back to our project. Let's stop this. And for our production server, I don't want this to run on port 8085. I want it to run on port 80. And I want to have it have the flag of, I think it's restart always. And I want to actually have an env file. And I'm going to call the file name .env. We don't have that right now because I don't want to be pushing these live credentials. So what I'm going to do is this env.edn, I actually want it to be like a dev thing. So what I'm going to do is git ignore this. So git attributes or git ignore, and let's ignore env.edn. And then what I want to do is we need to go to source clj env and make sure that if this env.edn file doesn't exist, our app doesn't blow up. So to do that, we just need to run, well, we need to check if .exists, and then we need to run clojure.java.io/file, and then the file name, which is env.edn. If that exists, then we'll do this. Otherwise, we'll return a blank map. And let's put this in the right place. Cool, and that will cater for this file not being in our repo. And what we could do is we could duplicate this and make like an example, or env.edn.example. So I actually still want this data, so I'm just going to copy it out of here and open Sublime and just paste that in there. And then this example file will just have, I don't know, empty string for, well, we can keep the host. We can just take out the username and password. So user and password. And yeah, let's make this a Git repo. So I'm going to go git init, git add dot, and then git commit am, and I'm just going to call this init. So let's make a new repo. I'm just going to go to my GitHub page, repositories, create a new one, and I'm going to call this short URL deploy, create repository, and let's add this origin, go back here. And let's git push it. If we refresh this. Cool, so now we've created our GitHub repo, and I want to pull this on our server here. So what I'm going to do is generate an SSH key. So SSH key gen. So after we create it, let's copy it. Then we can go back to our repo, go to settings, and if we go to deploy keys, you can add a deploy key here, paste this in here and give it the title of Linode and add key. Sweet. So now we should be able to clone this repo. Well, it's a public repo, but I mean, if this were private, that's what you would do. So let's go just git clone. Sweet, and now we should be able to cd into short URL deploy, and we should be able to run docker compose up app. Okay, couldn't find a .env file, so let's just make one. So we can go touch.env, edit that, so nano.env. Cool, once we've done that, we can save this file. Then we should be able to run docker compose again, docker compose up app. Okay, so we're getting this command not found tailwind, and that's because I made a mistake here. We actually need to go back to our Docker file, and it's not tailwind, it's tailwind CSS. Save this, then let's git commit am, fix Docker file, git push. Now we should be able to git pull. And let's retry that. Cool, now we're getting another error here. env.clj. Okay, so the issue here is that this function is not exists. It exists. That's why you should test stuff before you just deploy it. But anyway, let's retry that. So git commit am, fix env file, git push. Then let's pull again here. Git pull. And we can retry that deploy, hopefully for the last time. Cool, so it looks like it actually worked. So we see the starting app print line. Now if we go to Linode and we copy the IP address and we paste it in our browser, we see our application. So let's just copy this, paste this. It's working, awesome. So that's all cool, but I want this to actually deploy every time I just push to that branch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop this, and let's look at using a GitHub action to do that. So to use a GitHub action, all we need to do is make a new folder, call it .github, and inside of that we want to make another new folder, call it workflows, and I'm just going to call this one deploy.yaml. And essentially all I really want to do here is SSH into my Linode server and do exactly what I would have done manually. To do that, we can, Appleboy has made this SSH script for us. Let's just copy it out. So we can just copy this, paste this, we want this on push to main. So I think it's on push, then branches, then main. I think that works. Okay, we don't want to run who am I. What we want to run is a multi-line script, and this will basically cd into short URL deploy. Then we'll run git pull, and then we need to run docker compose app. We can add a build flag here, and we also want this to run in the background. So to do that, all we need to do is add a daemon flag here, and now we need to say give it our host, a username and password. Well, this port, so the SSH port is going to be 22. The host is going to be that IP address. Now we just need to give it a username and password. We can actually say, I think the username would be root. And let's give it a secret password. So let's go back to our repo. Settings. Secrets. And we'll add a password here. And that's going to be the password that we gave our Linode server. Cool, I'm just going to copy that password in here. Now I think all I need to do is git commit am updated workflows. Well, let's go git add dot, then run git commit am added workflows, git push. Now I think we should see a workflow running. If we go to actions, cool, so our workflow is here, but it didn't run. Let's just see why. Oh, and that's because we need a space here. So let's fix workflows. I also just noticed one thing. I misspelled URL on this repo. It's ULR, which is fine. Let's make like I did it on purpose. So we need to cd into short ULR deploy. And let's try this again. Fix workflows, git push. Now we should have an automated deployment. Cool, and it's running. So we have an issue. It didn't work. Let's just see why. I think it's possible that this host needs to just be the IP. Let's try that. Cool, and this actually looks like it's working. So I'm actually gonna just make a change so we can see this change happen in on our site. I don't know, let's go to our source, CLJS, our core, and let's change the color here. So instead of BG pink 100, maybe we can do 500. And it's more pink. Let's push that. And now we should see another build start. So if we go actions, we should see another workflow running, which is more pink. And let's see this working. Cool, and that build successfully ran. So now if we go to short URL app and we refresh this, we got a more pink application. And let's copy this URL, paste it in here, click shorten URL, click this URL, and the redirect works. Cool, and that's just one way to deploy a Clojure application. You could, if you wanted to, in your pipeline, instead of SSHing into a server and then building the image on your own server, build the image in the pipeline, push that to Docker Hub or wherever you want to host that image, and then pull that image onto your server and deploy it. There's many ways. You could use Kubernetes, or you could deploy it in another way, but this is a nice simple way to get up and running deploying your Clojure application. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. See you in the next one. Bye.